And welcome to our children. We are sure you're going to have a fascinating life, right? All of us old folks, life is fascinating, isn't it? How many people have ever done one of those life journey timeline exercises? It's one of those workshopy kind of things we get into where you lay out a long piece of paper and you draw a nice long straight line, and on the left you put your birthday, and then you put all like little events in your life along this timeline. Well, I've done lots of these, and though I really do like this exercise and I get a lot out of it, I've always been a little suspicious of the physical representation of that line. This single straight line seems to imply a linear road to my life, as if I was born, and then in some really orderly fashion, stuff lines up and happens, one after another, a nice straight line that brings me to the present. But whose life has ever really been one straight line? Bruce, this is where you stand up and say, "Amen, sister."
Amen, sister.
Yeah. You did good. Whose life indeed has ever followed some easily identifiable linear path from start to finish. Most of our lives look a little bit more like this. Oh, been there again. Oh, done that. Here I am again. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am. Amen, sister. Indeed, life is not one straight directional line, and though we do not know if we shall ever pass this way again, chances are we do. Again and again, over and over, our life repeats patterns, doesn't it? One of the most spiritually impactful novels I read as a young adult was called Initiation by Elizabeth Hake. It's set in this time-bending story between modern time and ancient Egypt, and the story follows this young woman's initiation into the spiritual path. Of the many spiritual lessons the woman encounters, the one that struck me most was this: if you would have one thing guide your life, look for that which repeats itself again and again. I'll say that again. If you would have one thing guide your life, look for that which repeats itself again and again. In other words, life will not be a straight line of isolated events. Instead, life happens in patterns, right? Of events that twist and turn and fold onto each other in ways we couldn't have imagined. The goal, if there is one, of the spiritual journey is to just notice these patterns and learn to read their wisdom. And I think that's a little easier said than done. I mean, ignoring our patterns is pretty simple, right? It's something we get good at. Because, if we ignore them, it will all go away, right? If I just hold my breath long enough and I pretend not to see it, it's not there, right? You can't see me, Bruce. I'm not here.
I see it.
I'm not here. I think if this strategy worked, if ignoring our lives would just somehow heal our wounds, my guess is that many therapists and spiritual teachers would be out of a job. But the bliss of ignorance doesn't last forever. And all too soon, the pattern repeats, doesn't it? Old wounds are triggered. Unresolved relationship issues show back up in new ways. We cry at the same old heartbreak love songs. And we fill our journals with entries that revisit tried and true themes in our lives over and over again. Now, ancient cultures from around the world understood this view of repeating patterns in our life that were not one straight line. And they created this physical representation of the spiral of life in the form of labyrinths. Labyrinth carvings and constructions are hundreds and even thousands of years old and have been found in numerous places around the world, from ancient Greece and Rome and Egypt and the Celtic tradition. Many, many traditions have some form of this labyrinth design. And they all consist of this one path that bends and folds back over itself, arriving at a center, and then winds back out. They are said to symbolize the journey of life and the spiritual journey of the soul. Now, in modern times, the symbol of the labyrinth emerged even as a Jungian archetype for self-discovery. Carl Jung saw the labyrinth as a symbol of reconciliation between our inner self and the external world. He felt that the journey of the labyrinth leads one into their own psyche, the center of the self, and then we must come back out from that. It's a process that he felt necessary for dealing with issues in our lives. In his book, Stages of Life, Jung writes, "When we must deal with problems, we instinctively wish to hear only of unequivocal results and completely forget that these results can only be brought about when we have ventured into and emerged from the darkness," right? So instead of like, here's my problem, give me the answer, Jung is suggesting those answers only come from this journey. The serious problems in life are never fully resolved, he said. If ever they should appear to be so, it is a sure sign that something has been lost, right? So he's saying our problems we're never getting there, right? It's the journey. It's the journey, silly. Now, I'm not sure whether to be inspired or depressed by that statement, right? How about you? But not all modern psychology and contemporary spiritual teachers would agree that we are destined to repeat patterns again and again. And in fact, some teach an alternative path. In his book, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, Dr. Joe Dispenza suggests that real transformation comes in our lives if we simply break what he calls the habit of being ourselves. Indeed, he suggests that most of what we do as humans is a result of habituated ways of being. He notes that not only are our actions habitual, but so too are our thoughts and emotions. He estimates that about 90% of the thoughts you will have today are thoughts you had yesterday, and the day before, and the day before. I think he's being generous, because I think some days it's more like 99.9, right? Dispenza goes on to suggest that just like an addiction to a substance, we actually become addicted to those habitual thoughts and the emotional states they create. He notes that all thought produces emotion, right? As an example, if you enter this room today and you think, no one in this room likes me or cares that I'm even here, right? That thought will produce a certain emotion because the brain releases chemicals into the body as a result of that thought, and we end up having this visceral sensation. A sensation happens in our bodies. In other words, we feel something. In that example, that something is probably going to not feel too good, right? Most likely, if you walk in here and think no one is going to like you, the accompanying feeling is going to be a knot in your belly, maybe some tightness in your chest, and then an emotion of unworthiness or maybe loneliness is going to arise. Or maybe it goes in a different direction for you, and the emotion that arises is righteousness, which then produces the thought of like, well, who cares? I don't need these people anyway, right? Becomes this cycle of thinking and feeling and thinking and feeling. Of course, most of our daily thoughts are pretty benign. I have to remember to go get avocados from the store probably doesn't elicit a huge emotional response from you. Unless, of course, you think about the traffic and the price of avocados, right? But this is all par for the course on a normal day. This happens. We think, we feel, we think, we feel, right? However, Dispenza notes that it is when our thoughts and our emotions become habitual that we start down a very windy road. If every time you enter into any room, you have that same thought, no one cares that I'm here, your body will again and again produce the same chemical soup that produces the same bodily sensation, and the same emotions will arise over and over. Does anybody ever have this experience? Am I getting some, Is everybody thinking of that little emotion you carry around with you all the time, or that thought patterns you carry around, right? In the case I was giving, that might be loneliness or unworthiness or righteousness starts to like bubble up every time you walk into a room. Feeling these emotions then causes you to act in accord with them, right? If you feel unloved, are you going to reach out to a lot of people? Probably not, right? If you feel righteous, are you going to enter into a friendly conversation with someone? Probably not. It's a cycle that continues. So Dispenza says that over time, as the body gets habituated to receiving this chemical soup, the body actually becomes addicted to that mix of chemicals and to those sensations and to those emotions, right? So we can become addicted to the feeling of unworthiness or righteousness or loneliness, or you fill in the blank. We all have one. After a while, the body starts to send us its own messages to the brain. It says, hey, hello, we're going into a new room. Remember, we like our chemical soup that's associated with this. We need our little chemicals that are going to feel lonely or feel unworthy or feel righteous. And so the brain conjures up those thoughts. Oh, yeah, right. I don't know why I'm going into this place. No one cares about me. These are all off-base people. I wouldn't want to get to know them anyway, right? Whatever the thoughts. And then guess what? You start to feel in alignment with your thoughts because the body responds. And it doesn't take long for this habit to take over in events that have nothing to do with entering a room in this example. Eventually, says Dispenza, as that person gets so practiced at feeling unworthy or feeling righteous or feeling lonely, whatever that feeling is, they start to create a belief and an affirmation about that is who they are or that is what life is. And once the belief is locked in, you will establish patterns of behavior to affirm that belief again and again. And I've been here again, right? How many people have ever done this, right? Same place. Right? Well, there's no solution, so let's go have a cake. No, teasing. But the pattern will continue, right? Others will see you, and then we start to say of each other, oh, that's just their personality, right? These patterns, these belief systems, this way of being becomes so habituated that it just becomes who we are, and others see us and say, that's just them. That's just their personality. Little do they suspect it would be more accurate for them to say, oh, that is just how they practiced being, right? So next time you see some way, oh, certain politicians are very practiced at being certain ways, but so are we. In her book, Brené Brown speaks about one habitual pattern of behavior I think many of us practice. It's this, it's when even if something is going just fine, we stop ourselves and we think, uh-oh. Oh, I hear some laughs. Anybody do this? This is good. This is a little bit too good, right? I wonder when the bad thing is going to happen. I love my children so much. Boy, I hope something bad never happens to them, right? It's like we can't experience loving our children without that other thought right there. Oh, I hope they're going to be okay. Instead of allowing ourselves to sit in a place of joy, we kind of pre-plan or prepare ourselves for some future terrible event that may never happen. And in doing so, we practice in that moment the feelings of that terrible event. Right? You know how like you kind of like think about a terrible event, you kind of feel it a little bit. You feel like, oh wow, what if I got in a car accident on my way home? And if everybody started thinking that right now, we'd all kind of start feeling this little thought about that, right? And if we practice that, we can get really good about having that anxiety feeling. Oh my gosh, what if this happens? What if that happens? To quote Brené Brown about this, she says, when we lose our tolerance for joy, joy becomes foreboding. And in the words of Dr. Dispenza, he would say, if we become habituated to feeling anxiety or fear along with the bits of joy, it will be impossible to experience joy without it, right? How many people are able to just really sit and feel joyous without all the other stuff sneaking in? I'm going to make that a challenge for your week to just notice. Notice this week how many times you allow yourself to just really sit in joy without that little commentary. So according to Dr. Dispenza, unless we break the habits of being who we have been, we will be caught in the same repeating labyrinth of emotions, thoughts, and actions. So how do we do this? How do we break this habit that locks us into patterns? Well, I think the list is long about many things. Dr. Dispenza teaches a lot of meditation, which I've practiced and is very helpful. But today I want to just focus on one practice I think that's very accessible for all of us. And it's a practice that if you were at our installation last week, you heard Reverend Heather Janulis speak about. Because she asked this question. She posed the question, where is the sacred? And I remember in meetings with her when she was my supervisor, that's what we talked about so often. Where is the sacred in this? Where is the mundane? Where in the mundane, and even in the profound, in the joy and in the struggle is the sacred? And maybe you prefer other language besides sacred and you would just prefer the language of love, right? Where is the love in this? And I really think that by asking this question, it's one way to start breaking those old habits, these old patterns of negative emotion. Right? Earlier, when we declared to our children that they were born from goodness and are blessed with universal love, that they are born as sacred. And I think if we really believe that, if we really believe what we just said to our children, then I think one of our core practices as Unitarian Universalists would be indeed to practice viewing this goodness, to practice recognizing the love in everything, to practice seeing the sacred, basically to make a habit out of recognizing goodness. Think of how much our society these days is trying to train us into recognizing the not goodness, recognizing the bad, recognizing the pain. And I'm not saying we should ignore those, but how often do we allow ourselves to find the joy and the sacred even within all of the other things? I know this may sound improbable, especially in today's political and social climate, because we have become so patterned to see the enemy in others. But here's some good and bad news. I think that when we fail to recognize the humanity and goodness, the sacred in someone, the first time they pass by us in our spiral of life, we will surely see them again and again and again. They may have different names, but they're the same opportunity. Because perhaps our lives are a spiral by design so that we do face a lot of the same situations again and again, not as some morbid Groundhog Day hell, but simply as a chance to not miss the sacred, to not miss that opportunity to love again and again. My guru, my teacher used to say, do everything with so much love in your heart that you would never want to do it any other way. Do everything you do with so much love in your heart that you would never want to do it any other way. What if we are destined to repeat our lives over and over again until we can do that? Until we can live each moment with so much love, love each person so fully that we would never want to do it any other way. I know it sounds unattainable. That's why I personally believe in multiple lives. I give myself the out. I can come back and finish this work. So let me wrap up by just saying the message of this morning is this. Your life will repeat itself. Okay, that's probably not news. It's going to repeat itself over and over. And over, life will come to you, and you are going to get to decide how you will engage with it. My hope for each of us is that we take the opportunity each turn to practice seeing the goodness, that we take that opportunity at each turn to practice recognizing the joy and the sacred and the love, not just in ourselves, but in each other. We're going to have a labyrinth out here in the middle of the sanctuary after service. The chairs will be moved aside. It's going to be this big, beautiful labyrinth. And I invite you to come and practice walking the labyrinth. And as you move through these pathways that curve back into itself, think of for yourself, what is that pattern? What is that pattern for you that you repeat again and again and again? And then enter yourself into the center of that labyrinth and perhaps make a decision to when you walk back out to see it differently. Think of those same patterns in life, those same opportunities in life, and how can you see them differently? How can you conjure up a different emotion in those moments? May you indeed break any habits you hold that keep you from seeing and celebrating the sacred as you travel the labyrinth of your life, my friends.